There is still plenty to talk about from the 40k side of things after the summer preview, but as I mentioned earlier, I am a bit strapped for time this weekend as I'm actually away, so I wanted to talk about the other big bit of news first and foremost, and that is actually over on the AOS front, which is the reveal, finally, of a totally brand new army, at least brand new for Age of Sigmar. If you are a fan of old Warhammer Fantasy, this will be a bit of a throwback, but finally we have an updated version of the old Chaos Dwarves, and that is represented in this new AOS faction, the Helsmiths of Hashut. So these guys are the followers of the dark god Hashut. They've got a load of lore about how they came over from the world that was old Warhammer Fantasy, but these guys essentially, they are called the Zardron, and they are here and they are part of the Chaos Grand Alliance. Now they did mention in the preview it's a little bit of a tenuous and fractured aspect of them because they don't really consider themselves to be corrupted by chaos, and I'm pretty sure Eddie actually mentioned in the preview that they would consider themselves to be part of the Order Grand Alliance, but they are very, very much part of chaos. It is a pretty big part of their story about how, chaos infests and tricks your mind. So they clearly, even though they think they may hate chaos and be on the good side, they have been corrupted and consumed by chaos. So they are absolutely 100% a reimagining of the Chaos Dwarves, and they are absolutely a faction of chaos. And just on the face of it, we do have to say, these guys look spectacular. It is not just a small release, this looks to be a fairly hefty, sizable release coming for the faction. They spring onto the scene not only with a full new battle tome, but also a complete army set, as well as a load of other units that are coming a bit later on down the line. So it really does seem that GW are hitting the ground running with this army, and they are giving players a lot of units, a lot of variety straight out of the gate, which I think is a really, really good thing. But what's coming first is, of course, the army set, so we will go through that. This will be the first and arguably quickest way to get yourself some of these new models. In the army set, you are getting 13 models, which may seem small, but it's also worth noting this is the army's spearhead, so they do have to be sort of that smaller size because that's what spearhead is based around, and it does actually look, in my opinion, to be a fairly decent little way to get into the faction, and certainly, if nothing else, to try them out with those spearhead rules to see if you enjoy playing them, let alone building and painting them up. So the army set and the spearhead, it's led by a new hero option, which is called the War Despot. As you can see, this is very emblematic model of the whole vibe. He's got that ornate but slightly dark, twisted industrial armor all over him. He's got an impressively cool helmet, as you would expect, with those added horns to add a bit more gravitas to him. And then his weapon, which is allegedly called the Demon Flame Glaive, is sufficiently brutal and menacing, I think. What they pointed out that I think is really interesting is that it's got that small green orb on the weapon, which is said to essentially be crushed up demon power or demon essence that they've infused into their weapons and their kind of armor and that sort of thing. So all of their talk about being good and being on the side of order, they're clearly not. They are clearly corrupted and engaging in the dark side of things and embracing chaos and, taking that demonic power and literally infusing their stuff with it. So they are definitely not walking the straight and narrow path here. He is just overall an incredibly fantastic foot hero. I know sometimes they can be a bit uninspired, but I really do like him. I think it's another example of the AOS team pretty much always managing to hit it out the park when it comes to their designs. So I think for just a generic infantry foot hero, he does look very, very good. Next up in the set is the main battle line infantry, and in this you get 2 5-man units of the Infernal Cohorts. I imagine it is very likely in full games of AOS you will be able to reinforce this unit to a unit of 10, but in Spearhead you do have those set units, so in Spearhead at least this will probably be 2 units of 5 and you have to take them as separate units. But again, I love the look of them, I love that industrial, metallic, cold look that they have on their armor and their weaponry. There is no joy, no kind of inspiration or light in their designs. It is just cruel and barbaric and weathered, and you even see that across their faces. Like, their whole look and demeanor is just meanness. Like these guys, they clearly never have a good day, and that's sort of how the Chaos Dwarves have always meant to appear, in my mind anyway. They are just cruel and malicious and evil, and that comes across so well in these designs. I think probably the best way to capture it, in my opinion, is that these guys look like they've come right out of the Saruman playbook of tearing down the forests and replacing them with industries. You know that scene in Lord of the Rings where he's telling his minions to tear down the forests and burn everything? That is exactly how I envision the Chaos Dwarves, and it's exactly how they look in their models. As we'll see a lot in this release, there do seem to be a lot of dual option builds in most of their kits, and the first one we get is here. So you have an option, it seems, to build them with either spears or swords, and they do say in the reveal this isn't purely an aesthetic choice like some of the other units in AOS have. You do actually get different rules, so I imagine they will have a different war scroll. The spears are better for a more defensive use, so when you're getting charged you will get some bonuses, probably something like +1 rend when you get charged or something like that. The swords, on the other hand, are for a more offensive unit, so letting you move up and get the charge off into the enemy and get stuck into them and start to take objectives from them. I'll say again, I just love the design. I love how you can see those green orbs scattered around their weapons and armor. Just, you know, that demonic essence which is infused across them to really show how far this faction has fallen and how they are embracing that demonic energy to improve their own designs and their own tools. Next up on the spearhead, it comes with not just one, but also two, what I would consider centerpiece units. The Tormentor Bombard is a massive mortar that Eddie has said is got a very good range for AOS anyway. It is meant to have up to a 30-inch threat range, so it can hit enemies from very far away and do a really good job of taking out infantry. It is apparently able to do damage not just to its target, but also any enemy units that are unfortunate enough to be near to them. So a really great way to, you know, punish and damage enemy units that may be blocked up together or just hanging around together to move up as a united front. You can really break up those enemy battle lines well with this. It also has that perfect aesthetic for the army. It looks just simple and rugged and functional and just plain cruel. Like the cannon itself is, you know, just a slab of metal aimed up in the sky. It's just there to rain down demonic fire on the enemy, and I just think it looks great. The whole piece has a little bit of a diorama feel to it with a lot of character in the design. You know, you've got the Zardron that are filling up the gun and just working around it, and just it does have this mini diorama feel to it. I think it sounds like it's going to be a hell of a gun, and straight off the bat it sounds like it's going to put the Zardron right up there for one of the best ranged factions in Age of Sigmar. You also get another option for it. Again, this is a dual build kit. The Death Shrieker rocket battery is another build option you can choose for it. I don't think it personally looks quite as cool, but some people might like the trifecta of rockets. You know, if that's your thing, then yeah, it will look very cool to you. This is said instead to be a dedicated monster killer. So whilst the Bombard is more of an anti-infantry option, in the preview video they say that with some good rolling with the rockets, you can easily one-shot enemy monsters with this. So I imagine this is going to be, you know, probably wounding on 2s or 3s at worst, and I imagine it will be a solid 3 or 4 damage to really chunk through those big multi-wound monsters. So you get an option of anti-infantry or anti-monster, but both I think look fine, both look cool. I think the Bombard looks a bit better, but if you are looking for some ranged options for your army, these are definitely going to be things that you may want to pick up. The final new unit from the army set and the spearhead itself is the even more stupendously cool Dominator engine. This is almost an effigy to their patron god Hashut, who is very much inspired with, as we've seen from the army already, that sort of bull aesthetic. And you can clearly see in that design, you know, it does look like just this big walking metallic bull. This is absolutely the sort of thing that I imagine a beastman would worship as well. So the Dominator engine, again, it's a dual build kit. You can either build it with those 2 massive cannons that you can see on the screen now, or instead you can build it with a melee option. The cannons are called immolation cannons, and they say if you want to just move up and just douse the opponent in flame, in demonic flame, you can do that with those. The Bane Maces, which are the melee option, they are for getting in up close and personal and just whacking things to death with those massive flaming maces. What I love about this is just the design of the model again is so good. It's almost semi-steampunk, but just in this absolutely chaotic evil form. I love how it's so clearly constructed and metallic with no sort of, there's nothing nice or soft about it. It is just hard, crude metal, but it's clearly being powered by this inner like combustion engine of demonic fire. And you can see it sort of like in its belly all billowing out, and all the the pipes on its arms and on the back. It is just a very industrial feel, and I love that for the Chaos Dwarves and for the Helsmiths of Hashut, I should say. It is just so emblematic of their design aesthetic, and this just screams that design at its absolute peak for me. They mention in terms of rules as well, it does have a 2-up save, which as anyone that plays AOS will know is incredibly rare. Off the top of my head, I can only think of Skull Crushers and maybe the Bastiladon for the Seraphon. I think that's still got a 2-up save, but certainly I think there are less than, 5 or 6 War Scrolls in the entire game that have a 2-up save. So this is a very rare thing, and it's going to be incredibly hard to get rid of. I think one of the things that I really appreciate from this Spearhead alone is that there are so many dual build kits in it. From just this box, from just the Spearhead, you've got at least 3 units that are dual kit. So you can build the infantry, the Infernal Cohort with blades or spears. You've got the 2 build options for the artillery piece. And then this Dominator engine also has those options in the cannons or the maces. So the Spearhead, although that will of course have a set build option that you need for your bigger games of Age of Sigmar, this box alone will get you a load of customization. And even if you just buy 2 of these Spearhead boxes, that alone could get you up to 7 different sets of rules and War Scrolls to play around with, which for a brand new army is really good. It's always annoying when they release a new army and they don't quite go far enough in terms of giving you that option. So I would say personally the Emperor's Children fall into that category. They've had this cool new codex, but they don't really have many War Scroll datasheets, should I say, in it. This book sounds like it's going to have a lot of option and variety in terms of what you build and what you want to bring. And to go further on that, it does say in the article about this that the Battle Tome contains 32 War Scrolls, so there is a lot of units to play with, straight as soon as the book drops. Certainly if you compare it to some other smaller factions in AOS, the Fire Slayers or even the Caradron Overlords, the new Helsmiths of Hashut already have bigger ranges from the sounds of it than either of those armies. So this is coming out of the gate very strong, with a lot to play around with and a lot to buy and build and paint. We do also get to actually see some of the other bits that are coming a bit further down the line. It is not just being left as a complete surprise. First up coming is another foot hero, and it is mentioned in the article these are all supposed to be coming over the course of a few months after the main army box releases, so they're not coming out immediately, but they will be coming a little bit further down the line. The Demon Smiths are your more caster style hero from the sounds of things. They will probably be a little bit less durable and killy in melee than something like your War Despot, but they are apparently able to control and hurl around that demonic power as their sort of ranged firepower. They're also mentioned to be able to heal up your war engines, so you could potentially make those 2-up save Dominator engines even more survivable on the battlefield. So I think, points depending of course, they're going to be a very worthwhile unit just to keep things like your Demon engines and your Dominator engines trucking a bit longer. Equally, this is also a dual kit, so yet another one. You can also make an Ashen Elder with this, which is essentially going to be a priest for the army, so you will likely be able to, chant prayers and buff your army up that way. Interestingly, in terms of this model, it does have a hammer, which the Zardron don't really approve of because it is a symbol of some of their hated enemies and the other dwarven ancestor gods, so they really don't like hammers. But what's cool about this one is that he's clearly taken this hammer from a fallen foe and he has corrupted it. So you can see that green orb, the demonic energy that he's infused it with. So it's almost like a mockery of that symbol of the other dwarven ancestor gods. So I really like it. And being a priest of Hashut, that's really fitting for me. Like, he obviously would take a symbol of an enemy god and tried to kind of corrupt it in its own way to add like an insult to it. So I think that's really thematic and fun, and definitely very fitting for something like a Ashen Elder to be wielding. One of the most popular sort of returning units to the faction is the Bull Centaurs. Chaos Dwarves, you can see them on the screen now. Bull Centaurs were amazingly fun. They were hilarious. They looked a bit goofy, but I just loved them, and they were, and still are, to be honest, one of the most popular units that the old Chaos Dwarves had, and it is really good to see them coming back in a much more impressive vibe. Like, don't get me wrong, the old Bull Centaurs, they encapsulated for me that late 80s, early 90s Warhammer and that whole vibe, you know, the green bases, the flock, they were peak early Warhammer for me. But these guys, as they've like updated them and brought them into the modern era, they do look incredibly good. They seem to be absolutely massive. You know, these guys are looking at, Chaos Knight or the Seraphon Agrodon Rider size. You know, they are big cavalry models, and they've got those massive dual mauls, so they look like they're going to be absolutely brutal when they hit combat. And also they will hopefully, considering the faction is going to be fairly slow, being a dwarven faction, they will add some much needed speed to the army. This is another dual kit, so yet another one. These can also be built as Anointed Sentinels, which are more of a defensive option apparently. So they are supposedly a lot better at sort of counter-attacking and can attack very quickly. So maybe being able to use them and their sort of halberd style weapons as this defensive unit to protect some of your other units or objectives or your heroes on the battlefield. They also look very cool with those golden bull masks. I don't know if I prefer them or just the regular Bull Centaurs. I kind of feel like I prefer the regular Bull Centaurs, but how they are rules-wise seems like it's going to be very different, with the Bull Centaurs being a charge up, smash the enemy and be really aggressive, while the Anointed Sentinels are going to be a bit more of a unit that you hold back and use as a counterpunch. So it's not just a load of different units, you know, in terms of build design that you can do. It does look like they are actually making the army have a good range of tactical flexibility. You know, you've got your infantry that can be defensive or offensive. You've got your ranged weaponry that can be, you know, for anti-infantry or anti-monster. You've got a priest, you've got a caster, you've got a melee hero. There is a lot of build variety and tactical variety in this army, which I think is a really positive thing. Another unit that was and still is incredibly popular for the old Chaos Dwarves was their blunderbusses with their absolutely massive helmets. These guys also make a welcome return with some brand spanking new models in the Infernal Razors. Now the main unit is called Infernal Razors. It is again a dual build, so you can either equip them with blunderbusses to harken back to the past, or the new option, which is the Caragthruan Flame Hurlers. So you have a choice of what kind of shooting you want to throw into the enemy. It does say that the Flame Hurlers, I think they will both be mostly anti-infantry, but they do say in the preview that the Flame Hurlers can shoot in combat. So if you are using a unit that might get charged, but you want to fight your way off an objective or something like that, you could use them. The blunderbusses are meant to have a bit more range. So if you want a unit that just sits back a bit and just peppers the enemy as they move in, you could go for them. But either way, they sound very nasty. Eddie did say that in some situations you can get these guys up to Rend 3, which is again incredibly rare for Age of Sigmar, and it means that even things like, you know, Stormcast Eternals or Chaos Warriors are going to die in droves against this shooting. So I just think for what could be a gunline army, the Helsmiths of Hashut, they are really sitting up there with some of the best of them. It's not all just new dwarves though. These Ardron also come with the support of their Hobgrot Vandals. These guys are very similar to the Hobgrots that we've seen in armies like the Cruel Boys. They are more of a chaffy mob style unit that will just harass the enemy and maybe screen your more important units, or just slowly chip away at the enemy through sheer weight of dice. They will very likely be not very durable, not very strong, not very good in combat, but if they are cheap and have big units, they could be a very valuable addition to the army, because from the sounds of it, the rest of the faction is going to be very small, very expensive and very elite. So having those cheaper units of screens and, you know, blockers for charges is going to be really important to make sure that you get into the combats on your terms rather than being constantly charged by your opponent. The final unit reveal for the Helsmiths is another dual kit option. So as you can see, pretty much all of the options in this battle tome appear to be dual kits, which is really good. Uruk-Tar is the first named character for the faction, and he is the first of the demon smiths. So it is said in his lore that he was taught by Hashut himself, so he is incredibly ancient and incredibly powerful in terms of using that demonic energy and casting spells. And because of his age, you can see on his model his body slowly starting to turn to stone, which is this curse that afflicts all of the Zardron sorcerers as they use their dark magics and corrupted energies. And the stronger the sorcerer, the longer they can hold that at bay. So clearly Uruk-Tar is incredibly strong because he is so old, and whilst it is starting to affect him, he still hasn't been fully cursed by it yet. So he sounds like he's going to be really cool lore-wise. I also love the fact that this is a fantastic throwback to the old classic Great Taurus kit that everybody loved for the Chaos Dwarves. I do wonder if there is ever going to be something like the, what was it called? Was it called a Lamassu? I think there was another mounted option for the old Chaos Dwarves that was a really interesting design. I'll find a picture and I'll put it up on the screen now. But a Lamassu, it was kind of, again, peaked that sort of late 80s, early 90s Warhammer vibe for me, so I would love to see that one day. I don't think it's coming anytime soon with this release, but maybe for a future release down the line we might see it. But either way, the Great Taurus kit was great, and this is a super, super good update and upgrade and reincarnation of that model. I think gameplay-wise, he's probably going to be an incredibly strong wizard, probably being at least a 2, maybe even a 3-cast wizard. And then whilst he probably won't be super scary in melee, his mount, which is called Gorokros, seems like it's going to be a fairly scary one. You know, a massive bull charging into you, especially when it's made of literal, metal and stone, is going to hurt a lot. So I imagine he's going to be the caster, Gorokros is going to be the melee output, and they are going to be a relatively fast-moving, amazing centerpiece kit for the army. The alternative option is just a generic Demon Smith on its own mount, so it's a non-named version, probably be a little bit less impressive in terms of spellcasting and maybe melee, but of course being non-unique, you will get that option to take some artifacts and the like to maybe give it a bit more flexibility to do exactly what you want. May also be a little bit cheaper, so this should also be fairly good depending on what it can do. Whether you go for the named version or the generic version will likely depend on just how many points you've got, if there's any artifacts that you want to put on it, and just whether you want a named character in your army or you want to make your own lore or backstory for your heroes, which I know a lot of people do like to do. So really a huge set of reveals for the Helsmiths of Hashut. I, for one, have to say I love pretty much all of them. It's not an army that I personally can see myself getting anytime soon, just because I honestly can't afford another army at the moment, but I really do love all the models. They seem so well designed and thought out in terms of hitting that lore for the old Chaos Dwarves, and I like the fact that they've given us a, not complete, I would say, but a fairly big, expansive range right out of the gate. It just seems like they're going to be a very fun, very interesting, and very exciting faction to build and paint and play. And also, I would say, probably quite fun to play against. As always though, I'd really love to know your thoughts on the new Helsmiths of Hashut. Which model is your favourite from the reveal, and will you be picking them up to add to your AOS collection? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.